Hello and welcome back to the Des Moines Radio Gamescast. As always, I'm your host Ryan, and today I'm joined by my lovely duo of co-hosts, Brett
Hello.
and Wyatt.
Hello.
We're having a nice, slightly late night tonight. We're going to talk about some Mario games. It's episode number 112, and we thought, good time to relax a little bit, talk about some Nintendo games that we don't normally talk too much about. We tend to talk a lot more about things that involve violence, so let's step away and talk about Mario. All right, great. So before we talk about Mario, though, we have a few things to talk about this week that are pretty interesting that came out. One is a little bit of news about Techland. I saw this pop up on my feed earlier, and I was very, very interested in this because Techland, the Dying Light developers and Dead Island developers, are currently working on a AAA fantasy RPG with concept art that they showed that looks like Mayan themed. And I'm very in. This to me is super cool.
Yeah.
The other piece of news of note here is that a lot of CD Projekt Red staff that had been at CD Projekt during the Witcher days is now at assisting on development of this title, including the narrative director of Witcher 2 and Witcher 3. So
that's
very interesting, and the narrative lead. Both of them are on this.
That's a whole heap of good talent right there.
Yeah, I would attempt to pronounce their names, but I would completely butcher it. I can say I think Carolina Stakura is the narrative director, who I think I can say well, but Arkadiusz Borowick, the narrative lead.
Moment.
I'm sorry.
You're a braver man than I.
I apologize for that.
You're a braver man than I.
It's true, yeah. The only
I
reason
give them the credit,
Wyatt and I will not be ostracized is because we're not actually saying the names.
True. 100% true.
Notice how I'm not saying anything for once? Exactly.
It is, I do, it's nice to see a Western developed RPG not just be like Knights and fantasy game number 500. Because I think we've talked about this kind of recently, where it's just like you have to bend that setting a lot for me. I think you also, Ryan, mentioned to find it interesting, because
I just think you really need to have the quality. If you're gonna do standard fantasy, you need to have the quality level that is indicative of something like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
which so few things have.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard to nail that.
And for me, it's there's this kind of like warm, comfy blanket feeling of like a good old fashioned European fantasy setting. Like there's something that's kind of like, I don't know. There's something that's kind of like comfortable and nice about it. But if you have something in a more unique setting, that's gonna immediately grab my attention more. Definitely.
Yeah. So I'm interested. I think the big quality indicator here is that Techland does some good melee combat. And
that's what I was gonna say.
First-person RPGs have never had good melee combat, especially open-world type things, which is what this is. So hopefully, if Dying Light and Dying Light 2 are indicative of the quality we can expect here, I'm really looking forward to seeing what a fantasy game with this kind of combat looks like. I think it'd be very fun.
And the one thing they always miss because we're most of us are fans of Dying Light on here. At least Ryan and I, we're fans of both games to a certain degree, and they just can never nail that story. And so if they can get a lot of outside help from some people,
the Witcher team being involved is definitely a mark of
it's
some
about
level
as
of faith.
exciting. It's about as exciting as when they said that Chris Avalon was going to be helping with the story or going to be writing.
He helped and then he left.
He helped and then he was an asshole and he left. So hopefully these guys stick around and their work is used, because those guys definitely know what they're doing in the narrative department. So.
Okay, so a couple other quick-paced ones. I just got to do a little mini angry rant here about announcements of announcements. Because the Square Enix has announced that there's going to be announcements regarding the 25th anniversary of Final Fantasy VII next month. The wording of this is great to me, because it's worded as they will make announcements next month regarding the 25th anniversary of Final Fantasy VII. It's not a confirmation of an announcement about Remake Part 2. It's just, we're going to make announcements regarding Final Fantasy VII's 25th anniversary. And I find this to be such confusing wording.
Yeah.
And not even more that we're getting to the point where I think 7 Remake Part 2 is starting to need to be announced. We're hitting the point where if it's not announced within this year, there's going to be some major concerns because it came out 2-3 years ago at this point, just about. So
Something like that, yeah.
I'm definitely hoping we get at least an announcement of the continuation. But hey, if they're holding off until it's ready, that's fine. I just hope they actually release it because Nomura's team has often had an interesting relationship with release dates. That's how I would
Time
put it.
moves
I mean,
differently for them.
Yeah, I was gonna say 7 Remake is a perfect example of this.
Yeah, but it is
Yes.
important to note the director of Remake Part 2, Tetsuya Nomura, is no longer in the director role.
Mm.
The one of the Remake Part 1 had 2 directors. One was Nomura and one was Naoki Hamaguchi. So Naoki Hamaguchi is going to be the full-time director for the second one, and Nomura is taking on a creative oversight position, which hopefully means maybe he'll step back a little bit and be willing to maybe let some other people take the lead on producing it, because I do think otherwise this game is not going to come out.
Mm-hmm.
That's the big concern I have. But yeah, hopefully it lives up to the excitement because I definitely want to play this game. I was very happy with Remake Part 1, and if Remake Part 2 is more of the same and just a more open structure, I would love that. So, all right, moving on. Y'all seen Multiversus?
I have.
I've seen
A
people
little
talk
bit.
about it, but
Multiversus is this I call it a nightmare creation of Warner Brothers things. This is a cool like Smash clone type idea, right? Where you have all these crazy characters. You have Gandalf fighting Steven Universe characters, fighting random people from like
Batman.
90s cartoons, Batman and Superman. It's just, this is a very
Scooby-Doo.
funny cast for a game, and I think the big thing that to me looks like it might set this apart is that I think this is gonna have voice acted characters. I don't
Yeah.
know that we've gotten a confirmation, but they've had a lot more trailer voice acting than the man. I'm blanking on Nickelodeon. That's what I'm looking for. Nickelodeon Brawl had, which is to me the big issue with the Nickelodeon Smash clone, is just that nobody's talking. So it's like it's dead air constantly, which is such a shame when you have characters like SpongeBob who could have some really fun taunts against other
Yeah.
characters, right? So hopefully they take advantage of voice acting. The cinematic trailer they showed kind of sold me. I'm kind of in.
Yeah.
I thought it was
But
actually legitimately pretty funny.
the other thing of note here is that it is free to play.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Which we'll see how that goes. I'm looking forward to trying it. I am not looking forward for the 27 skins that are going to be released for Harley Quinn within the first year. So you
She's
see that
there
look
for
on
a
your
reason.
face, right? You know what's going to happen.
If there's
Yeah.
any kind of genre that kind of fits into free to play really well in a way that you can monetize it where it's not obnoxious, this is a pretty good kind of genre to do that
Yeah,
with.
as long as you're careful with
Character
it.
packs and as
Yeah.
long as
But
you don't
Warner
go
Brothers has a
overboard.
track record of some rough systems with like Shadow
There you go.
Wars initial release and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we'll see how this pans out, especially because the Warner Games division is kind of dissolved and distributed to different people now. So hopefully it's
I
under
have
some different leadership.
a sneaking suspicion that a year from now we're going to be doing an episode of games that everyone forgot about and doesn't care about anymore, and this is going to be in there along with Nickelodeon All
Yeah.
Stars because I mean, free. I just like obviously because this isn't the topic, so I don't want to rant on it. But I agree with you, Wyatt, that you said this is the perfect genre to do this with, not because fighting games deserve to be free to play only, but because literally it's not Smash, so nobody's gonna care as much. Like
Yeah, if it's not free to
Smash
play, it's gonna
Ultimate,
have a hard time finding an
it's yeah,
audience.
exactly. And Smash Ultimate is like named
Not
that
going
for a
away.
reason.
It's
Exactly. It's the ultimate
Yeah.
Smash. It's
even if
going
it's
to
done
be there forever.
developing, that game is not going to go away for at least 10 years.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're already coming into a crowded ecosystem with Rivals of Ether having a lot of success. Even the indie space
Brawlhalla.
for these games is, yeah, Brawlhalla's got the free to play unlock. This I think will succeed or fail based on the recognition of characters, which right now I would pin as a success, at least for getting the initial group of players. We'll see if
at
they
least
stick
be
around.
around for like a month or two.
Yeah.
In the zeitgeist.
All
Plus,
right.
it's also really smart because Warner Brothers can time like character packs with the release of a movie, right? So it's like, oh, here's
Smart, yeah.
the Batman 2. The villain in this one is gonna be like Scarecrow or something. So we're gonna have a Scarecrow character for multiverses. So that would work out pretty well from a marketing standpoint.
Yeah, we'll see if a company can handle transmedia releases and time any kind of thing, Halo, cough cough, with the other media product. So,
Do we want to talk about that at all?
we
No.
will when it's done.
It is done.
It is. It is.
It's done? What?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Man.
It is.
Hey, alright, I guess next episode tune in for Halo Infinite in the Halo TV show that I don't think any of us have watched.
And nor do any of us
I
want
keep
to.
saying we should.
I
keep saying
can't
we
handle
should.
this, Wyatt.
No.
I can't handle watching this
Come
show.
on, we can do it. We can do it.
Can't you say that, but
Through
no,
the power of friendship, we can do it.
it's not strong
Through the
enough.
power of I don't want to give Paramount Plus any money.
That also.
Free trial. Free trial.
Right.
It's possible.
Get us out of the Paramount zone and bad TV shows.
Cowards.
Look, my time meter stick now is it better than Blue Reflection? And that's a high bar. So
I watched Morbius. Okay, my time was wasted once. Not again. That was my one thing for this year.
So you're saying
And
next
Full
year.
Metal Panic, which is not much better. I'm not gonna do it again.
No, what you're saying is come next year, we'll watch.
Yep. Sure.
Sure.
All right.
Once the countdown resets, then I'll be free.
I'm setting up a countdown right now. I'm doing it.
All right, we got more to talk about. Fall Guys is going free to play. I think we all definitely saw this coming.
Who cares?
Cool thing though, with this free to play announcement, user created levels are now possible,
Yes,
and you can create custom games in private lobbies with user created levels. So
That's cool.
that's really cool. I really like this, and it might get me to hop back in a little bit. If you ever bought a version of Fall Guys, you're automatically in like a premium category of player and have a bunch of stuff waiting for you if you open the game. So you got stuff. It's also crossplay, so any platform will play with any platform now. All right, that's the big news for this week, which means it's time to talk about Super Mario. And one thing that Super Mario as a franchise is known for, spin-offs. So our game for this week is I need you two to give me the best Mario spin-off title that you can think of that doesn't exist already. We're thinking of a Mario spin-off title. It's got to capture a niche that's different from the normal ones. Something like I would love to see a Mario spin-off horde shooter. Just what that would inevitably end up looking like is very funny to me. Mario
Right.
Dynasty Warriors, that would be quite great. You got a good amount of characters. Okay.
So, as we'll talk about, Mario has been to space. He's been to the stars. He has been on the ground for the majority of his life, and you can consider Sunshine as being in the water if you really try hard enough. We need our Mario arcade flight game.
Of
Where
course.
where is the Project Aces and Super Mario crossover event?
Where's
You've
the
had-
Top
you've-
Gun and Mario crossover?
Exactly. We have the Donkey Kong F-18 in the Ace Combat game that's on the DS, which I cannot get out of my head. Every time I close my eyes, I see it. Where is the whole game about that? I want Mario to have his maybe everyone, it could be like Mario Kart where everyone gets their little themed cart or whatever, and everyone gets their little plane or air vehicle. It could it could ease children in to the greatest franchise of video games of all time, Ace Combat. You start young, and then they want more, and as they grow into an adult, they need something more mature.
They
and
grow
that's
to
where
love Ace
is.
Combat.
Exactly, yes. You plant the seeds for them to become better people as they grow older.
One
Way of
thing that
putting it.
One thing that that often happens with franchises after a certain amount of time is that they go through the gritty remake phase,
Oh yeah.
Oh, of course.
where it's completely rebooted and everyone is just a miserable asshole. So I submit to you the Naughty Dog version of a Mario game.
Of course, it's
God.
Naughty Dog too.
It is. It has to
God.
be. This is me we're talking about. So
Yup.
so it's got to be, narrative driven, linear third person action game. You got Mario as your main character. You got Peach as your AI companion throughout most of the game. And they're traveling through the Mushroom Kingdom trying to escape the clutches of Bowser, that is of course a giant evil ancient dragon that has arisen after a giant horrible war uh in the Mushroom Kingdom. And when he throws fireballs at people, they actually catch on fire, and it's the most horrific thing you've ever seen.
I love that we've also given Naughty Dog the reputation of just being extreme realism when they did make the Uncharted games.
Oh, I know.
They did make mini games that are not like that at all. Uh, I would love to see this. I'd love to see Mario and Luigi rendered in realistic Naughty Dog proportions, and how
It's like,
wrong that would
They could
be.
look like Chris Pratt.
Yeah. It's like all
There's your
those
tie-in.
those classic meme posts from like 2007 or whatever. This is what graphics will look like in 2012, and it's like one of those pictures of Mario where he has like pores and he's just had like real skin texture all over him and
Oh,
stuff.
yep.
It's just
Yeah.
that, but a whole game.
If you want
And
it to
10
be
years late.
if you want it to be super try hard, you could have it be Mario and Peach, and they're like, yeah, people always put us in this like, oh, I gotta go save Peach, but I don't really know you as a person that well. And then they legitimately get to know each other through the course of the adventure, and they develop a legitimate
Or
romance filled
Wyatt,
with
we want to take it even further. They're already married and they get divorced over the course of the game.
Oh my god.
Oh no, they divorced before the game, and then the whole thing is them
It's them
rekindling their
repairing their-
marriage.
Well,
Yeah,
that's the
yeah.
rom-com version. That's not the gritty realism. That's the Hallmark movie equivalent. All right, now that we've dreamt up these horrific
Telling it
Mario
takes two
amalgamations,
a Hallmark card story. How dare you? How dare you?
it's truly horrible. Okay, so I want to actually talk about some Mario games today. So first of all, I wanted to ask, let's lay out some general foundations of Mario experience so people know where we're working off of. I've played most 3D Mario games and like all the 2D ones prior to the DS days, I would say. Maybe one or two of the Wii versions of some new Super Mario thing. But that's my level of experience. I've played most of them aside from not having played Galaxy notably until today. And not obviously not having played Galaxy 2, or I hadn't played Sunshine until recently either. But after that, I've played most of them. So, who wants to go next? Who wants to outline their Mario credentials?
Go for it, Brett.
Well, I'm not a big Nintendo brain person that's played every single Mario every 20 times, but like, I played the original. I played Mario. Yeah, I've
I've played the
played
Mario.
the old 2D Marios like to the point where, they at least I can register them as having been played in my brain. They definitely don't all blend together at all. And then big fan of Mario Galaxy, and I played a pretty solid amount of Odyssey. If we're just sticking with the main line, what you'd expect from Mario titles, obviously.
Yeah, the
all that
mainline
clear.
Mario. We're not talking about the
Yeah.
spin-offs. No Super Mario Party in our chat
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
So
Thank God.
keep it to the main line, Wyatt.
So all right, I'm gonna run down the whole list. All right, so we're
It's
gonna
very
keep track, 'cause
extensive, I know.
It's a
Mhm.
pretty big list, so we're gonna keep track. Okay, so I've played Mario Odyssey,
Good job.
and
Mario
then
Odyssey? Yep.
Mario Odyssey, right.
Great.
And then yeah.
All right. So we're going to talk about Mario 64 first, because I want to jumpstart us into the 3D era of Mario game. And then we might work backwards a little bit. But what I really had an interesting take of today is I went to the Mario All-Star Collection, which I don't know why this isn't purchasable anymore. Very silly decision by Nintendo. I was lucky enough to get a copy when it was existing as a thing that you could buy. So I got to play the games, and I went and played a couple levels of Mario 64, and then I went and played a couple levels of Mario Galaxy, and then I went and played like one level of Sunshine because I played a lot of Sunshine before. I didn't need to renegotiate my enjoyment of Mario Sunshine. There are so few changes in how Mario controls between the three of those games, and even up to Odyssey. I think outside of the cappy mechanics, Mario controls exactly the same with the same button combinations the entire time. And I
Well,
think
it's
this
worth
is
pointing out
yeah,
you were playing all of these on the Switch. You
on the
said
Switch. Yes.
because it's worth pointing out that Galaxy, the OG way, is Wiimote and Nunchuck.
Well,
Yeah,
So
so I
that
played
that
I played
enough.
it with Joy-Cons. You do use the Joy-Con as a Wiimote essentially, and you have the
Mhm.
little star bit collector. So you've got all the mechanics of that just in the much better shape and handling
Yes,
ability of
exactly. Which is the difference I wanted
modern
to
Nintendo
highlight.
controllers.
Yeah.
But the button combos are all the same.
and I did want to point out too, it's interesting how they all feel the same. And that's probably because it's on this nice Switch collection, and you're using the same controller for all three of them. But notably, a lot of these games obviously have different control schemes. If you're playing Mario 64, you're using the abomination known as the N64 controller, which I can't even imagine how that
I would say
would
they have different
play.
control methods. I don't think they have different control schemes. The schemes have stayed the same, but the controllers themselves are different. Because in all of them, you got your Z, L, and A. That's your running long jump. You
Mhm.
crouch and then do your long jump. You got your ZL and back. That's your big flip backwards that you can do. And everything like around that trigger and all the jumps and whatnot always seems on the exact same buttons. They might be in different places on the controller, but they're the same buttons. Uh, the reason I wanted to call attention to this is because of the original development like logs they left for Super Mario 64, where they talked about how they spent months just doing the movement of Mario and how smooth that is. And the fact that they could then take that for until modern day, essentially. And they've just added new mechanics to all the games, and each of them has their own little gimmicks and whatnot. I think it's really incredible that base control scheme and mechanics have made their way to every game, with the notable exception of they don't feel the same. Mario 64
Mhm.
doesn't feel as good as people often attribute it to feeling
No.
today. 95% of the reason is the camera.
Yes.
It's definitely not the actual control because Mario controls fine. It's just the camera is a bit of a nightmare because it is not
I
adjustable.
Now, could they have done anything better back in the day using the N64 controller?
Oh
well,
no,
this
it was
is
revolutionary.
yeah.
Right.
The
Well,
the reason
that's
like
the yeah.
they've just this is the game where they've justified the camera existing by having a
Yeah,
little Lakitu hold it for you because they didn't know how else to convey how a 3D camera worked to a child because it was new.
hmm
Like that was the justification for that. And I'd like to place at least the remaining 5% of the blame on some of the level design and platform in 64
yeah,
because
being
some of it
very
is
tight.
it's just cruel. It's just mean.
It's
It's
truly the Dark Souls of
terrible.
platforming.
God.
Yeah. But I think that points to how well they've adjusted with modern stuff, which is weird to
Yeah.
say with Nintendo, because Nintendo is usually not good at adjusting to modern standards. But with camera controls especially, going from 64 to Sunshine to Galaxy is a big like progression in each one of how the camera works, because you have Sunshine, which mostly has a free camera from the majority of the game. You've got standard, because you have the GameCube controller with two joysticks, so you could actually control the camera somewhat sensibly. Um, then you go to Galaxy, which almost entirely has a locked camera again.
Nope.
Except this time it works way better than it did in 64. And I think that's really interesting coming now to the like latest two Mario games, which are Super Mario 3D World and Odyssey, because you then now have like two splits of 3D Mario with
Yeah.
different camera styles, but still the same control scheme, which I just find really interesting as a split that's happened where you can keep the same controls but have very different camera functions to get different feelings. All right, Brett, I've been holding you back long enough. I know you want to talk about Mario Galaxy. I sat down today to play Mario Galaxy for the first time, and intended to probably just play about an hour of it. Instantly played 4 because it's
It is a
extremely
very good
good.
game.
But I want to let you take the lead here because you're the one that has beaten the game. So go for the
Yes.
Mario Galaxy discussion.
This we talked about this in our gamer psychoanalysis episode, but for a while Mario Galaxy was my favorite game ever, and it's still like ever since it's come out. And I one of the things that I was able to play on release because all I had was a Wii, it has still like been in the top 5 or top 10, which nothing else really has had as long of a reign in the upper echelon. Because it's just like for a Mario game, it's so weird because it's like probably the easiest one out of all of them. Like you just replace Mario with an original character and just have like no like Mario-esque characters. Just like replace the Mario characters with just like something that would fit space better, and it would be fine. Mario almost feels like an afterthought, dare I say, because it's just
Yeah.
like it's the worlds and galaxies look so weird. The soundtrack is so very unlike Mario. Everything before and after it sounds completely different. And like some of the things that they ask of you, like yeah, the controls are the same, but some of the things they ask of you from a gameplay perspective are very different and weird than what other Mario games want for you. And like the story, like what the only thing that they had to compare to with some of the more serious things is Flood saying goodbye in Mario Sunshine, and you cried at that when you're like 6. Rosalina makes me tear up to this day
I
because
just
man,
I
they
like having played just the first hour. Or not first hour, first 4 hours at this point of Galaxy, which is still a significant portion of the game. Going into that and seeing the amount of dialogue compared to any other Mario thing that I've played that isn't
Mhm.
like a Mario RPG game, um, pretty crazy. Because you have like
Yeah.
full plot details and you have like a Zelda style slideshow at the start that goes through the story as it is, which is really interesting.
Yeah. Which is I think also like I mean, obviously, like how awesome is that beginning for just like sucking the player in and just like, okay, like every other time it's like, oh man, Peach is gone. Bowser brings in his mercenary UFO and blows up the city and turns all the toads to crystal and probably like kills them if they decided to go into that much detail, and everything's burning, and he steals her away and flies away on his giant space pirate ship, and the orchestral music is going crazy, and Mario's just like, I
Uh,
guess I'm a go up. I guess I'm a screwed. It's like for a beginning of a Mario game, it really does feel like the beginning of a Zelda game almost. Like it has that like cataclysmic event for one of the games that takes place in a more of the post-apocalyptic settings that Zelda sometimes has. It's perfect for bringing like either a kid or even a more mature player in to what is like I still consider it a kids game. Obviously, I don't think it's inappropriate for any like younger person at all. I don't think it's still Mario, obviously, and still Nintendo, and they're very good at like deciding what that line is in terms of like not crossing
yeah.
it and going into mature territory. But like, it's testing it for what can be in a Nintendo kids game. And it doesn't really drop that attitude the whole way through. Like, I, some of the worlds are pretty hard, and I remember being a child and getting very frustrated at some of them to
Hmm.
the point of baby tears because I could not win. And like I said, with some of the Rosalina stuff, I mean, they just get so serious, where they have like the saddest piano song I've ever heard in my entire life playing in the library while you're reading her backstory, and it's just like, dude,
Someone put a
where's the
lot of
love?
thought into what's going on here compared
Yeah.
to the normal Mario flow. Because I played Paper Mario, the latest Paper Mario, Origami King, relatively
Mhm.
recently, and I think even compared to that, there is more going on here. in terms of like details in the story, which is wild that it's just a regular Mario game
Yeah.
compared to the RPGs. And yeah, I do want to mention especially the way that the camera and how gravity is handled
Yes.
is so cool. I do think it
Mhm.
does lead to, this is one of those games I imagine Alex would get incredibly motion sick
Oh, totally. Yeah.
playing this game, because I had to like adjust my mind to the fact that sometimes I'd run and the camera would focus on me like with the planet like this, and I had to
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
run at a very specific angle. So it's definitely an interesting adjustment, and it generally works really well, especially in sections that have more
Mhm.
visible gravity in a certain direction of like there's a black hole beneath you and you can kind of see how it's forming around the planet, or you're in like an up and down section that has gravity flipping in different areas. Um,
Mhm.
I did notice though there's a few little issues that pop up
Oh.
because of this. One is that if you hold your control stick at a specific angle, which can just happen while you're running around, you'll start doing rapid circles and just where you are. And I don't 100% know what triggers this.
I think it's got to be because I mean, if you have the closest thing you can get in a Nintendo game to simulated gravity around a sphere, like you're gonna have like infinite amounts of poles, I guess, or whatever, coming out from the center of the sphere. And I
Yeah.
guess if you hold it at the perfect angle, you're just gonna end up orbiting.
'Cause I think what happens is the camera determines the direction of your movement until you've started moving, and then does the Resident Evil thing where it locks you into that direction
Mhm.
until the camera like changes again, or you let your hand off the stick. But because it's so easy to like do micro adjustments, I'll let my hand off and then put my hand back on, and suddenly the directions are not the same anymore from what I was just
Yeah,
doing.
yeah.
So it that has taken a lot of adjustment. It's been a thing that I've consistently noticed as an annoyance in the game. But aside from that, I think it's one of my favorite 3D Mario's, behind probably Odyssey and 3D Land, until it proves me wrong. But which it certainly could. I'm not that far. Yeah, I just think it's such a cool set of things, and I love Nintendo's philosophy on power ups and like gimmicks in stages
Mhm.
where they last exactly as long as they need to. So
Yeah.
when I play the honeybee level and get like all this honey set of mechanics, I've used that once, and then they're probably gonna pull it up once more later, I bet, and that's gonna be it. That's gonna be
Yep.
all I see of that, and it's gonna be just enough to think, oh, that's a cool mechanic. All right, I'm good. Move on to the next
Yep.
thing.
The power
Um,
ups pretty much get used like twice maximum if they even
yeah,
have their own like galaxy devoted to them, and that's it. And you can
They
go back
know
for optional stuff, but it's optional. So
they know exactly how many times to use a gimmick before it gets stale. Like
yeah,
yes.
it's a really, really difficult, like especially if you play like, an Ubisoft open world game which has 2 or 3 cool ideas and then just drives it into the ground until you're sick of it. Like this is
yeah.
exact opposite. It's
It
like
really just
we're
takes like
gonna
a
use this.
willingness to get rid of mechanic, even if you think there might be like one other cool thing you can do. If there's not like five other cool things you can do, don't use it
Mhm.
anymore.
Yeah, it's I can't like it must be a process of like, okay, here's our gimmick, and then they just come up with like hundreds of different use cases for it, and then they select like,
The best. Yeah.
Yeah.
5, 10 to work with, and then probably trim it down even more.
Because I think on top of that too, just like I mean, obviously it's a sandbox for Mario is different than the sandbox for something like Halo or something. Like you're not switching weapons and dealing with like grenade physics and stickies and stuff like that. But like I think the sandbox in Mario Galaxy, because they have the gravity mechanics and the platform mechanics and all like the weird like little puzzle solving things of like the different stuff that could possibly like chase or block you and stuff. They have those down. Like once you iron out the kinks that are there, just because of the fact that it was a Wii game and they were trying so many new things.
Yeah.
Once you iron out those kinks when you're playing it, like you can really tell they just have a huge amount of ideas and they don't need to rely on the Fireflower or something being like a sometimes pickup like it would be in a lot of the older games where you just like see it in a level and be like, okay, this I could store up 3 of these, or this is the 90th time I've run into one because they just come in random levels sometimes. It's like, no,
Yep.
there's like 2 or 3 scenarios per, and that's it, because every
Yeah.
other situation is purely based around something is blocking you, something is chasing you, or you need to jump in a certain way to kill the thing. And they have so many different variants of that they really don't need to rely on pretty
One a
much
good
anything that
example
will
of
get
that
old.
is like one of the early bosses where it turns into a tennis match of you
Yeah, that's super
bouncing a
fun.
coconut just because it's using like the mechanic that had been present in that zone of you can hit a
Yep.
coconut to defeat certain enemies, but then the enemy learns how to block it, so you get like a rally tennis match essentially for a
Mhm.
very brief moment with a boss, and it those little ideas where it's such a natural progression of what you've learned in the level, and you also don't need to explain it. Like no one has to tell
Yeah.
me this is what you do to defeat the boss. I have eyes.
And not only do you have eyes, Ryan, you might notice that you also have ears because every time you make a successful rally, it does like a
Yep.
jazz chord up back and forth. It goes bam 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 bam, and it's really satisfying to
That
hear it
hits
go
on
up
the
all
other
the
thing I
way.
want to talk about with Galaxy specifically is that I think this is when Nintendo hit their we understand how to do a Mario tutorial actually
Hmm.
right. Because a lot of people talk about Super Mario, the original Mario games, 1-1 being a good tutorial level, but that falls apart if you do certain things because you can't. You have to in that moment jump on the thing, hit the block, get the thing. That then teaches you all those mechanics. If you don't do that and you run away and then lose the thing and then jump on top of something and keep going, the tutorial hasn't worked. You haven't learned anything. So
Hmm.
I think that tutorial is like good if the player does it right, but so many people are not going to do it right. They're going to do whatever they want when they're playing it. So it leads to confusion. By the time you get to Galaxy, because with 64, they had the problem of, okay, now they're over explaining things. Now I'm getting text boxes for every mechanic. That's maybe a little bit excessive, although 64 has the benefit of you can ignore them. You can just run past the little read boxes. But the way that they thought to tell the player how to do things is put text boxes here. In Galaxy, it feels like they knew when to do that and when not to, because they'll give me a tutorial on how to use the Starbit Wiimote shooting thing, because that is not super self-explanatory how that works. So that is explained. But then when I get the bee suit and then learn that it's not immune to water and you can jump in water and lose it, you learn that by going up and they have a platform that you have to get to the next area of the level. This platform is 90% water. So most players are going to go up and land in the water and go, whoops, now I need to go back and get the bee suit at this bee spawner right nearby.
Yep.
So you are in a situation where it doesn't matter if you do it right or wrong. There's a way to get back there very quickly, and it doesn't cost you a life or anything. So you learn in that situation very quickly how this water works. If you don't do it, you will very quickly learn on the next area that has water everywhere what's going to happen. And even if you don't ever die to the water, they start to place the water in ways that look like hazards
Hmm.
so that even if you know as Mario you'll be fine in the water, you'll kind of figure as B Mario, maybe I shouldn't be. Why would these water jets be here if they're not going to break my
Exactly.
B
Yeah.
suit? So it really feels like they learned how to design a level that actually encourages you to use a mechanic correctly without necessarily needing to teach it to you, which I think is
Yeah.
really impressive. And that continues from then. I think all the other more recent Mario games, 2D and 3D, have been really good at teaching that type of mechanic
Yeah.
in a way that is not terrible. There,
Yeah.
that's it. Anything else about Mario Galaxy you want to add, Brett?
Um. I mean, just like overall stuff. I guess while we're still
The hub world's
having
really
the
cool.
the hub world is, I think, one of my favorite hubs because it just look like a bunch of stuff thrown together?
Yep,
Kind
and
of,
then it
yeah, but that's the
visually
point.
changes as you get further, which
Yes,
is great.
exactly. You unlock more doors to go through in a very satisfying way. There's
Feels
so
like a
much you can
Lego hub world.
explore. Yes, it does. It does because it has all the different themes visually represented and stuff. It's really, yeah. Um, and then while we still have tutorials, kind of like more in the frontal lobe. Um, don't forget also that they teach the beginning stuff in a way where it's not like, okay, make sure you press the stick and do that. It's like, no, here's an orb. Go go find some bunnies around the
Go find
orb. They're
orb.
hiding. You gotta run around the little
You
playground.
remember
and
Mario
find-
64 and how much people hated that basement section? Do that, but now it's not nearly as bad. So,
It's fun. Yeah, exactly.
although I did have to look for like 8 minutes for the last one because I was very stupid and ignored that they kept saying maybe I should have hid in the grass.
No.
It's like, oh, so I shouldn't look in the grass because you didn't.
God, you're thinking it too hard, Ryan. These are children that they're trying to find them.
Look, I was like,
God.
oh, so that's
Big
where it's
brain for the
not,
Mario game.
which doesn't make sense because I got it the first time when they're like, oh, go check by the crater. So I was like, all right, I'll go check by the crater. And then the second time, can't tell
Nintendo
you
pulled
what
a
happened.
fast one on you. And then the last thing I'll say that stays true for pretty much the entire game is that this is one of the actually the best soundtracks ever. Like I'll talk about Nier or Final Fantasy VII Remake having one of the best soundtracks. I'd go so far as to say that Mario Galaxy 1 soundtrack is like underrated because people just don't talk about it anymore because it's not a JRPG. So it's not like immediately expected to
it
have
doesn't
a
have
great
angelic
soundtrack.
choirs.
Exactly, yeah. But it just has it almost feels like a Ghibli movie soundtrack where it just has like those strings and the way they put the horns in and the way everything goes together is just so like you are having fun. Ah! Like, it's just blaring that feeling of having a great time right into every pore of my body and it's yes, I am. This is great. Thank you.
I'm having a good time.
Exactly.
Yeah. I do want to call out one specific boss that I fought against. The like big crab leg monstrosity boss, which is like I think the third boss that you fight. Super
The first
cool.
main one, yeah.
Yeah, the first biggest one. And walks around. You have to like climb up the leg, and then you do like a little Shadow of the Colossus run up a gear leg onto the head, and it is peak. What if we did Shadow of the Colossus, but it was Mario? And that to me is really cool. I always love the like gigantic mechanical bosses that happen in Mario games occasionally. So that boss design specifically was super fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing what other bosses exist. So, all right,
Get ready.
jump forward in time a little bit to not Super Mario Odyssey. Still gotta wait a minute, Wyatt. We gotta jump to Super Mario 3D. In the 3D franchise, I believe 3D World is the console one, but
I think so.
I'll double check that. I want to call out these games specifically because they take such a great view of how to implement the 2D level design of Mario into 3D, where you have these very built out structured levels, but they get hard. 3D World especially the things you unlock after you beat the main campaign. You get some like crazy remixes of levels and whatnot that are way more difficult, and it feels like they were just like, all right, you guys have said you want a Mario game that has more difficulty to it, more zaniness. Here, beat this, and put it in front of you.
Those games specifically, especially with all the stuff that they've added in, it's like it almost feels like they don't even have to make like another one because they've just exhausted they've absolutely wrenched out every single drop of 2D to 3D Mario sandbox that they possibly could. Like unless they add like a whole new like mushroom or something like that.
Because they added the Bowser's Fury mode, which essentially takes some of the Odyssey
yeah.
adjustments and puts them into 3D World's gameplay, where you still have that like really snappy, and 3D World is definitely a bit more cartoony in how you tend to jump a little bit farther than I think you do in Odyssey, and you have more zippy momentum, whereas Odyssey has more weight. So I think 3D World still plays pretty different, and Bowser's Fury is a really cool adjustment of that into like this small open world space. So I'd love to see how that kind of gets taken in the future to new Mario thoughts, new Mario games, whenever we inevitably get whatever the Odyssey sequel is going to be. So I'm looking forward to seeing where these ideas go. I do think 3D World is definitely currently probably my favorite 3D Mario, just because it has the level structure that it gets you right into the fun immediately.
Yeah.
So it's very fun. I do think that game just deserves a lot of special praise, and Bowser's Fury is a very cool addition. Now it's time to talk about Super Mario Odyssey, Wyatt. So how was this as your first Mario game?
How? Well, to put it bluntly, jumping on enemies, it just never made sense to me. Not that like, oh, this is a dumb mechanic. More in the sense of like, I'm too stupid to be able
It
to
wasn't
line
a
it up
thing that
properly
you
where I
ever.
don't like. I'll try and jump on a Goomba and then I'll arc it perfectly to land right in front of him and get hit and just be like, okay.
Okay,
I
and
see.
I
just
see.
platformers, especially 2D platformers, is just not something that my brain computes. I don't know what it is. I can't calculate jump arcs properly. And that is not the fault of the game in any way. That's just me. So platformers are just not my thing. But with this one, I heard it was very accessible to newer players, and I liked the idea of like the cappy mechanic a lot. The sort of open ended structure to all the levels and stuff was pretty interesting. So I was like, why not? Let's give it a try. And I loved it. I I love this game.
I do think Cappy is probably my favorite Mario gimmick.
Yeah.
We'll see if maybe that might change to Galaxy's like gravity by the time I finish it, because I do really like how they handle gravity in that game. But Cappy as a thing that you can do just adds so much to a game. It
is very
really
cool.
is a fun mechanic.
It's
Yeah.
not just, oh, I can throw Cappy on a tree and become a tree. He's like a form of an attack. You can use him as a platform. You can use him as an extra
The like
jump. You can
jump
use
tricks
him.
you can do with Cappy are insane. There's people that can
The,
get
cr-
across entire levels without ever touching the ground.
the
Yep.
crazy things. I mean, listen, if you still watch video game donkey videos, the things he's able to achieve in Mario Odyssey blew my mind. Like that was the first time when I watched one of his like one of the balloon like game mode videos.
Yeah,
Just the crazy stuff he was pulling off. I didn't even think was possible, and it's insane. Like the skill, it's very accessible for people like me, but I mean the skill gaps is crazy. Like what it allows you to do is unreal, honestly.
definitely. And I
Um,
do really appreciate the content that it got post release of especially the balloon mode is just such a fun platformer idea of go hide this balloon somewhere in this little level and see how quickly another player can find it. I think that's just such a cool asynchronous multiplayer idea in this type of game where it's just go put this somewhere and see if they find it by then. Well,
and
it's just a really fun idea.
it makes you wonder too, because like almost all of the areas I can think of are really well designed for that game mode. So it's like, did they design the areas with this game mode in mind before it even came out? Like it makes you wonder how far they were thinking ahead in terms of like post launch support.
Yeah,
You know,
I'm really curious about that.
but I think the biggest thing that stands out to me was just how much they rewarded you for being curious about a level. It's like, oh, this is kind
Yeah,
of like
yeah.
an empty looking area. Like, I'm
Hmm.
gonna walk right over to the edge of the map. Oh, if you drop down, there's this little cave with like a crap ton of like coins in it and stuff. Like, they do such a good job because the areas are like condensed. They're really like small, but they are absolutely jam packed with stuff to do, things to collect, coins, and they do such a good job of never telling you that there's something over there, but they use a lot of different
Pulling you in that direction.
the
Yeah.
level design just from a like a visual, like a psychological perspective is like there's something over there. We're not gonna say what, and we're not even gonna say that it's over there. But it's that like you may not have noticed it, but your brain did. There's something over there, and you want to
Yeah.
know what it is. And they
Yep.
do such a good job of that.
Yeah. It's like they
Why?
took the you
Go
go.
ahead, Bright.
It's like they took like I think we talked about this in the Elden Ring games cast maybe, but like the good part of open world design where it's like, okay, I don't need a waypoint if there's just like a cool tree over here or if there's a
Yeah.
cool mountain over here. Like there shouldn't be nothing at the top of the tallest mountain on the map. Halo Infinite. There should be something there. I wasted my time going up it. There should be something cool, or there should be something cool hidden off this cliff that I can clearly just barely hug the side of. And like which I don't think they really should have even worried about that because those, like you said, those worlds are so small. But like they didn't even care about stopping. They just went absolutely insane. It is impossible to feel bored while playing Odyssey
Yeah.
because there's just so much to
Yeah.
do.
It was because I usually never like when I complete the story mode in a game or like quote unquote complete the game, I'm done with it and I move on to something else. Just because there's something about like returning back to a game after I just played it where I'm like, I'm not really feeling this anymore because I feel like I've concluded my time with the
Mhm.
game, right? Like I'm done. This is one of the few games where like I went back to every single area and tried to get as many coins and collectibles as I possibly could.
Hmm.
I never do that for a game,
Get
but these
all those
areas are so
moons.
much. Yeah, no, I didn't get every single moon, but I was pretty impressed with myself. I got like, 3/4 of the way there or something. And there's like over 800 moons
There's
in
a
this
Yeah,
game.
lot.
there's like
Yeah.
There's a
890,
lot of
870
there's a
something.
lot of moons.
Yeah.
And so it says something for me where it's like I finally went back and just replayed all of these areas and just spent so much time like dicking around and looking for
Yep.
things.
All right, Wyatt, you have done exactly what I hoped would happen, which is you've hooked us into what is the real topic of this episode that I wanted to get to,
Oh.
which is how do we take the incredible level design and world design of Mario games and pull it into games that are not platformers? Because I was playing earlier today, not earlier today, earlier this weekend, a little known game called Ghost Recon Wildlands.
Oh man.
Notably, this is not
Oh
the bad
man.
Ghost Recon game. This is
Right,
the
right.
one that came out before Breakpoint.
This was the
Um,
pretty good one.
this is the okay one. It was like 7 out of 10s. You know, it's a
It's an
military
Ubisoft game. A 7 out of
game,
10.
and man, I really like a lot of the mechanics of this game. I like it. Feels like someone took the ideas presented in Metal Gear Solid 5 and decided, hey, let's build a more full game out of this and make the open world a little bit more interesting. And then they didn't know how to make an open world more interesting. And so they just made generic Just Cause Far Cry locations in a Spanish speaking area and called it a day. So I've been having mixed feelings with this game, mostly because I really like the gameplay. The stealth action is great. It's very good. The AI is incredibly stupid, as it is in almost every stealth game. So I don't particularly count that against the game, but I do think it does not put up as much of a fun experience as it could compared to some of its competitors. And I have to think most of that is down to the design of camps and what you can do in the world and how instead of like finding a weapon on a mission or something, I just find a big crate with a gigantic weapon logo sitting in the middle of a field, and I'm like, all right, this is doesn't feel like the game pulled me here. It feels like I
Put that
stumbled in the
there.
right direction completely randomly. Um, and then there's moments of the game where I go rescue a hostage, and right outside is like an enemy helicopter that they just landed. And it's like, hey, this is a really cool moment where they provided enemies that could spawn in with this. So if I shoot them down without killing them and they land this here, I can then take it and get my hostage out very easily with this helicopter. So there's like it's this constant back and forth of what feels like halfway to the right decision, and then we completely forgot what we were aiming for. Which to me also describes Watch Dogs Legion, and also describes Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
Very Ubisoft trademark,
But
one might say.
specifically modern Ubisoft, not.
Mhm.
I think if you go back to like the Black Flag days, you don't really see this, which is really interesting to me because Black Flag has to do it very differently because you're looking at whole islands and not a like small confined level. So that you need to be like, okay, well, how does an island tempt me to go to it? And the answer is just give a weird rock outcropping that looks funky.
Yeah.
Put trees in weird places. Have it not have any icons on the map, and I'm gonna be like, what's over there? If you don't give me an
Yeah.
icon and everything else is icons, I'm like, well, what's there? And it feels like they had that down at Black Flag. To a lesser degree, I think Origins did it really well, aside from the fact that Origins ends up being very level grindy. I think a lot of the actual world design in that game does pull you in the right direction of like, you see a pyramid, there's going to be stuff to do in the pyramid when you get there, and they're going to use that for cool crossovers where Final Fantasy 15 characters show up and you get a chocobo camel for some reason. So
I
yeah,
will say, in terms of Ubisoft open world, I think probably the best recent example of like good open world design, I think Immortals Phoenix Rising does a very good job
absolutely.
of like, because it's much smaller and it's a much more like cartoony art style. So they make more crazy looking stuff to kind of entice you to an area. So I think that's a recent
Yeah.
example of, but that's also such a like very atypical Ubisoft, and I don't know if we're ever going to see something like that again for a while. I don't know. I hope we do, but you know,
It's
Yeah,
every like
love to see
half
more like
decade
that.
we'll see a grow up or an Immortals Phoenix Rising where it's
Maybe
just
when the
like
Prince of Persia remake comes out, we can relive the
maybe
glory days of Ubisoft doing really good level design.
yeah, because a lot of the times it's just like, and I guess we can bring this back to comparing it to what Mario games usually do well too. Is like how many obviously because like as time has gone on, I've played less and less of them, but how many modern Ubisoft games where it just feels like this it didn't really get the polish it deserved, and it almost feels like they didn't
Yeah,
really have that much fun making it. Like, you can't obviously, different kind of game, but, like, you're telling me that the developers of Rainbow Six Siege had fun making it? Are you insane?
that does remind me. We
No.
did see today a announcement of Rainbow Six Siege getting Yakuza characters into Siege, which
As
to me,
operators?
so they're skins for existing operators. It still is
Okay.
ridiculous.
That is
It's
dumb.
I
incredibly
think
insane.
I think
God.
one example to kind of like answer that question, one example of an Ubisoft, like a typical Ubisoft open world game that I do feel like had a lot of love in it. I have such an affection for Watch Dogs 2. I think that was a game where I felt like the love and the passion came through because they weren't
But
taking
just
themselves
the ability to
seriously.
walk into a store.
Yeah, it was a very immersive open world, and you just had some bonkers weird missions, right? Like one of them is, oh, you have to go to an Ubisoft developer like building and then hack a bunch of their games that were also like hints at future Assassin's Creed games to come because oh, Ubisoft games get leaked all the time. Like that's a fun little mission that I feel like they probably had fun making, or one where you have to
Mhm.
like you have to walk around a bunch of like housekeeping robots that were just there vacuuming, but you have to like kind of sneak past them in order to get into
Yeah.
this like millionaire mansion, or like one of them is you have to like sneak into a like a Scientology type place to like uncover a bunch of secrets. Just that is one instance where like the level design was really good for I feel like Watch Dogs is always in like specific missions that had really fun level design with how you can hack all these different parts of the building and stuff. And that one they got really goofy with it. It was super weird and out there, and I feel like that was one where they had a lot of fun making it. But again, that's once in a blue moon, and it's
It's
also the
yeah,
ones that don't
exactly.
sell as well.
Which
Yeah.
is wild to me. I do find it really interesting that games like Watch Dogs 2 don't sell as well. Um, I wonder about if that happened with Immortals Phoenix Rising. I am curious about Phoenix Rising, and that I think that game probably sold more comparatively, but I
And I
wonder
think
how much
Watch
of that is
Dogs
just the art
2
style.
I think too, Watch Dogs 2 is let back by the first one and how overhyped it was. That was like one of the
Yeah.
first
Yes.
big examples of like Ubisoft way over promising and showing fake footage. Like that was the first time I think people as a whole began to notice that. And so I think that looms large over the series as a whole.
hmm
Mhm.
But
I just say it's such an interesting thing to look at. Um, all right, so I do think there's a few other games that demonstrate this point really well. One, I'm gonna bring back an oldie but a goodie, good old Skyrim, re-released for eternity. How do you take a game like Skyrim and drag people to different corners of things? How do you make an interesting dungeon, especially? Because Skyrim has this problem where I think this. I've been playing a lot of Skyrim recently just because I'm in a modding kick. But going back through a lot of the base game dungeons, you find two really different design philosophies with them. One of which is just, hey, there's a dungeon here, here's some enemies, this is it. That's what you get. One of them is here's a dungeon, here's like 10 phases of different areas, here's like 4 different art styles you're going through. The level of like difference in the quality of some of these things astounds me. Like if you look at Blackreach and then you look at anything else, it's just like how are these from the same game? So I wonder if it's just some kind of like quality control process that gets lost, if it's something along the lines of like obviously comparing the scope of something like Skyrim and the scope of Super Mario is a ridiculous statement.
you sound like a crazy person.
A little bit,
But
yeah.
but I think if you look at something like Odyssey or 3D World, they probably have a relatively similar number of like micro dungeons that you do
Yeah.
compared to something like Skyrim of like these weird little platforming levels. And I think the thing that makes those all really stand out is that you have in the Mario and actually in Breath of the Wild, I would say this works pretty similarly too in Shrines. This micro dose of a mechanic. They give you one new thing to play with whenever you're in one of these areas, and that's the idea for that section. And it feels like that type of design works really, really well. So I would love to see more design in any kind of proper thing that does that kind of mechanic where you'll have different like a singular mechanic that drives you through an area in like these different segmented spaces. I would love to see in Skyrim you get like a weird spell in one dungeon. You got to use that weird spell to do something crazy. You know, give me something strange like that. There's like bits where they play around that with the shouts, but I would love to see more wild mechanics. I wonder how much better Skyrim would be if it just had moving platforms.
They really never ever have that because I wouldn't
Legitimately.
know.
There's the occasional like maybe like gap you have to jump, but that feels pretty rare
Like
from
what
what I
if
remember.
what if you went on like a Dwemer expedition where there's moving platforms and you gotta like navigate through an area? That would be so fun. It just doesn't exist unless you get mods.
Yeah, I think it like that's definitely one of like and I'm speaking just about Odyssey obviously, but that's one of Odyssey's like biggest strengths is just the sheer amount of variety, but how it never falls under the weight of itself because it sections
Yeah.
everything off, like you said. It feels like everyone had a cool mechanic or like some sort of unique like level design idea, and Nintendo's like, okay, we're gonna give everyone a space. We're gonna give everyone a space to make whatever they want, and you're just gonna contain it to that one area so that you can develop it as much as you want, and then we're just gonna move on to the next thing. And because like the levels themselves are almost like hubs to other areas, but the hubs themselves are just as
Yep.
much fun as the areas you go to. It's
Mm-hmm.
very strange.
And I want to bring up a very specific thing that I played through recently, which is a Skyrim mod called Midwood Isle, which is it's an older, relatively small scale DLC type mod for Skyrim, where you're put in this little island of elves and you got to do some things. At one point, you wind up in a spirit world, and in the spirit world, you got to like go do 3 trials for the spirits there. And one of them is called the Trial of Kings. And this is the type of idea that I would have loved to see games like this run with, where what happens is you're teleported into this mini dungeon, which is just a series of like 5 rooms next to each other, and an NPC that talks to you. The first room is a room filled with books, and he goes, "Find this piece of information for me." And you just got to go find this piece of information in the books, and if you take too long, he'll tell you what book it's in, so you're not stuck there forever searching through like an entire library of things. But it's a really cool like interesting thing. Then he walks to the next room, and it's just like a single person sitting down who then tells you a crime that they committed, and you have to like decide what happens to them. And then you do that 3 more times, and for every option that you choose, I don't think there's a wrong way to do it, but for every one of these you get like 4 different options, and then he'll have a line of dialogue kind of reprimanding you for whatever you choose. And the entire point after that is revealed that it was like a test so that you can get past self-doubt and whatnot. It's a really cool section. And then it goes to a section where it's just a room filled with every crafting station in the game and a couple of random NPCs, and it's like, just do what feels right. You just go in this room, and all you have to do, I think you could probably just interact with anything in here to get it right. I just went to one of the beggars and gave him coin, and then he was like, all right, great. So I think little weird wackadoo ideas like that are what makes something like that so memorable.
It's almost like escape room esque, where it's just
Yes.
like because like in real life, I mean, you have the sandbox of the things that are available to you both in physics and in like objects in the room, and it's just like, okay, you're in the game now. All right, well, what are the mechanics that we can do? Well, it's Skyrim. There's no crafting mini game. Let's just make it a moral quandary that can be solved by crafting something in this room, and depending on what the player does, like that's exactly what like that. It's a very Nintendo esque thing to do, where like if the mechanic is
Yeah.
there and it doesn't have like 95 billion applications for every single thing under the sun, then is it really a Nintendo game? Because it's just
Mm-hmm.
like something like I'm gonna classify them as the same thing because they're both like vital to crafting is vital to a lot of adventure games, and jumping is vital to Mario. Like, how many things is jumping used to solve? It's
Yep.
weird, but how many things could you make crafting solve that isn't just I need weapon that has higher number in green. I will craft that. I just
Now, Brett,
craft something weird.
what gets even more interesting here is that's just one of 3 trials that you have to do for this quest. And this is one of like 10 quests in this little DLC thing, not including all the side quests. And you go and talk to, at another point, do something called the Trial of Scholars. And in this one, you're just presented into like a Skyrim type dungeon with no enemies, and it's just puzzles. It's just all environmental puzzles that you have to do. And it's way better than anything in the main game where you have to actually like logic out. And it just did one thing that like blew my mind that they thought of this. It's so simple. Instead of having images depicting what like thing to match to on the weird pillars, it describes the animal on the face of the pillar that you're meant to put there. And so you have to like riddle out which of the 3 animals it belongs in which position. And I'm just like, why was that not attempted in the main game? Because it's such a smooth line of like having a line that's like, I'm higher than everything on this list, but not stronger. And you're like, oh, that's the bird. And you have this interesting like little mini dungeon like that. And then the third one that you do in this little bit is a Trial of Champions, which is just an arena. It's just actual fighting. So you get this like nice microcosm of all the types of dungeony content in Skyrim. And it works really well to give you these little micro doses of things you can do. And it just, to me, is like, that's the type of design that I think works really well, where you have these little interesting characters that have you do interesting things. And like, the arena bit is very basic. You are in a boxy arena fighting single enemies at a time. But what makes it really memorable is there's a dude commentating over the entire fight that you do, like getting so hyped the entire time. And he's like, is the Dragonborn gonna do this? And he's like, oh, it's werewolves this time? And it's so fun, just having this weird, overhyped commentator who's like been dead for 100 years or something. And just seeing that kind of idea taken to a game like Skyrim is really interesting. And it's so unique. Going back, and this is where I wish we had Alex here to talk about Morrowind, because Morrowind does a lot of that. Morrowind definitely had a lot of that design where it's just pulling you to an area based on what's there. So I do just think it's a not a lost art, but an art that is slowly leaving the forefront of design in spaces. Yeah. So I'm hoping we get back to that with newer things.
It would be nice, because I think that's kind of attached to having trust in your audience that I feel like a lot of games do not. And they just simplify things down to where it's just like, baby should be able to solve this, and it's not fun for people who are not baby.
Which there's definitely a place for those.
Oh, of course. But when everything's like that,
but whenever exactly.
Depressing.
Yeah. It also leads to, I think, a problem that I don't think this has happened yet. I think it will happen soon, where if everything is going for a general audience, the general audience will no longer be able to afford everything. Mm-hmm. Which means franchises that are moving from niche audiences to a general audience are going to have the problem of, okay, well, maybe we make more money once. Maybe this release that comes out makes big bucks one time. Now we've lost all of the players that had stuck with our franchise, that were keeping us afloat for this long. And now the general audience doesn't care for the second one that we've made. What do? You're out of luck at that point. Yep. I think this is a thing that we're going to start seeing more of, is the same reaction that like Far Cry 6 got of, okay, this is the same thing again, but with content that is maybe of slightly higher quality, but in exchange you've got this issue of the progression isn't the same, it's not as satisfying. You don't have perks anymore. Instead, you have these armor pieces that don't look good that you have to wear because they give you the perk that you want. And like, I enjoyed Far Cry 6, but I don't like that. I'd much rather not have to do with that. So I think there's this weird thing that we're moving towards of all these games starting to be the same, which is going to become a real problem. I'm just hoping we start to push away from that soon. I think you can see that with Bethesda. Specifically Fallout 76. So I think Fallout 76 was this is too much of the same reaction. outside of it just not technically working.
Not functioning as a working application.
It's like I've been on a binge of a lot of survival type games and survival crafting games, and Fallout 76 is, I think, technically speaking, better than a lot of them in concept, but not in execution. If you have this problem of, okay, it's got base building anywhere, but the base building's not fun. It's not enjoyable. You can't do a lot of things. I had to ask myself, why do I like building a house more in Skyrim than I do in Fallout 4? It's because in Skyrim, I don't have to make the outside look good. And trust me, I'm a person that's capable of making the outside look good, but I don't want to do it in
Sometimes
Fallout.
you just don't feel like it.
Sometimes I would
Takes a
rather
really long
choose
time.
I want to have a wizard's tower in this house, and so I get a wizard's tower when I put the materials in. And I think that's the complexity level that worked well for their type of building, and then the detail is in how you outfit the interior and like what items you make for the inside, and like how you basically become an interior designer for your home, which is cool. In Fallout, you have to do everything, and all of it looks bad. No matter what you do, you're gonna look like a bunch of junk, which is a cool aesthetic for a lot of things, but I don't want to make junk houses constantly. Sometimes I want a good looking house, and I can't do that when it all looks like junk shacks. So yeah, it's interesting to me because I just think it's weird that we've hit this point of things becoming so similar, and it's such a shame.
I forget what the video was talking about. I think it was a indie game called Cat World, but Nitro Rad. If either of you have ever heard of him, he is one of the classic indie game YouTubers. He said, "I don't understand," and I'm paraphrasing, "why people who are making games now just try to make games that are for everybody instead of just making the best version of the game that they're making." Because those are two very different
Which
things.
is wild. And you know what? Ubisoft is a perfect example of this, because Ubisoft does make one game that is the best version of a genre. Anno 1800 is like the best city builder that I've ever played. They've given it 4 years of DLC support. Every year this DLC gets tacked on, it's another like 30 to 40 bucks for a season pass. Most people that have played that game one time that are into city builders guarantee you have bought all of them because they're all really good. And guess what that means? Now you've made more money from this one game than you would on so many others. And of course, it's a limited scope because it's PC only. It's not a thing that you can have on consoles just because it's a game that is not conducive to that. So I do wonder just how... I wonder if the success of that is going to lead Ubisoft to do anything different. I don't know that it will. But I'm not confident they see it as success. But
city building as a genre is like... I would say it's one of the more popular niche communities, but I'd still say it's a niche community.
yeah.
But you look at every single other thing that Ubisoft's making, I don't think I would say that any of those communities that they're developing for are niche at all. Like all their games becoming open world adventure and the few other shooters that they're making, like those are hugely oversaturated genres. They don't have room to have that like, oh, we can stick with this one Assassin's Creed game and just keep like adding stuff to it for the next 5-10
when
years.
you're contending with Ghost of Tsushima and games like it, your competition has raised the bar, and now you need to also raise the bar if you're aiming for such a general audience.
I could see the mindset being, okay, we have our Far Cries, our Assassin's Creeds, all this stuff that like mainstream probably makes us the most amount of money. We'll let this little Anno thing exist in its own thing because people like it and it's doing well enough, but we don't want to have too many of these because they don't sell as well as our, open world stuff. It's like, yeah, people like Anno, whatever. We'll leave it alone as is.
Until the diminishing returns begin diminishing and the things that sell very well stop because nobody likes them anymore because they're all the same and like lackluster in a
and
lot
Anno
of
1800
ways.
will be good forever.
It's because now like at that point, I mean, like if you're willing to pay $40 again every single year, you have to assume competition. I don't care. I'm just gonna buy the same thing for the same game again because it's just gonna keep being the best one. I don't care. There's no competition for it because it's the best.
Which is
And
wild
you
to say,
compare
because
that
like
to-
city builders are a niche community. There are so many of them.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it is one of the most oversaturated indie genres. I think right next to platformers in terms of how many indie attempts at a city builder come out, and the ones that succeed are always the ones that do something different.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
games like Dorf Romantic, where it's a weird little tile-based mini city area builder that's very different from a regular thing. Because people aren't going to stop playing Civilization, Anno, their grand strategy games to play a city builder that is mediocre. So you have to kind of find what your niche is going to be. So it's a weird little dichotomy of, do you go for that more niche community that's going to be more willing to spend a lot of money, but it's also going to not buy it if it's not good. Yeah. All right. We've hit on the topics I had listed today. We're going to end a little bit early because we started quite a bit late this time because we have some schedule overlap, but that does mean it's time for shoutouts. We got some good ones this time. Wyatt, you look ready.
I am ready. We were talking about Mario music, and
Yeah.
it's all good. But I would like to submit my favorite Mario track, which, granted, I only know the one Mario game, but I'm going to submit it anyway. The Fossil Falls theme is
It is
incredible,
really good.
and it is a song that has stuck with me ever since I first played the game and heard it. It's so good. It's so good.
Brett, you
All right.
prepared with your shout out?
I am actually very excited because I've been meaning to recommend this game to other people for pretty much all week. It's a little early access game on Steam called Lunacid. It's like if you attach the words Luna and acid together at the A. It's by the
Excellent.
guy who did Lost in Vivo and a guy who did some work on Spooky's Jump Scare Mansion or whatever the hell that game is called. If you like your low poly
Brett,
throwback,
I saw images of this and immediately I want to play it.
yes, if you like your low poly throwback games that have just super weird atmospheres but are made really well, Lunacid does, like, the only reason that Lunacid feels like it's an early access is because there's a big door, like, depending on how you play it, 10 hours in that is like, okay, I didn't make this part yet. Mechanically and like atmospherically, it is like super good. If you like Kingsfield, any of those really old like famous From Software games, this is absolutely up your alley. It is really fun. The amount of different like builds and classes you can do is pretty crazy. Currently magic is overpowered and you can just spam the cast button 90 times in 1 second and just obliterate anything standing in front of you. It's amazing. It's so much
Yeah.
fun, and I'm going to be following it as it keeps being developed because it's very, very good.
This has immediately gotten a follow from me too, because this looks super
Oh,
cool. All right, that's you two. I want to talk about a little known game called Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga,
Never
and
heard of it.
the fact that they just released 4 more capital ship encounters for free. I
Ooh.
have never seen Lego do this, where they've just added content for free. And the capital ship encounters are basically like mini levels on their own, and it can be like an hour of stuff to do, depending on with all 4 of them combined. So it's just a cool thing that's released, especially because you can now fight a Venator and claim it, which is the thing I wanted to do in this game from the start. They only had the enemy ships in there, so you couldn't fight a Venator. I want a Venator, and now I can get a Venator, and that's very exciting to me. So I just love that they put the time in to do that. Very excited to play through that. All right, as always, Tuesday morning, 7 a.m. Eastern Time, on the podcast platform of your choice. We'll see you next time. That's it. That's the outro.
Bye.
Mario.
Mario.
More like Mari, no.
Oh, right at the beat drop too, dude. Jeez.
Great timing.
Alex isn't
Savage.
here. Someone's got to pick up the slack.
It's true.